It seems like lately there's been a lot of interest in cozy games, and I really wanted to try my hand at making one. A perfect opportunity presented itself with last week's Ludum Dare game jam. The theme this time was delivery, which I felt like was a great theme to make something cozy and relaxing for. It was my first time participating in Ludum Dare, and if you're not familiar, there are two main formats. The first one is Jam, where you have 72 hours to make a game, and you can work in a team, while the other is the Combo format, where you only have 48 hours to make your game, and it must be solo. I decided to do Combo since I'm a total Daniel Mullins wannabe. Given my choice, there wasn't much time. However, as much as I tried to think of a good game idea, I was pretty jet lagged since I just got back from a trip to Japan and my brain was completely blanking out on me. Several hours passed by with no luck and I decided to go to sleep. When I woke up, I had a faint idea of what I wanted to do. Thinking back to my trip, I was inspired to make something related. The idea I had was a simple game about cycling through the Japanese countryside, delivering something to your neighbors to match with the theme of delivery. There's been a few cool games I've seen like Townscaper and Garden Galaxy and the upcoming Tiny Glade and Gordlets that have no true objective, which I thought I could piggyback off of. The idea would be that you can just kick back and watch the scenery go by, and not much else other than that. That way the scope wouldn't be too overblown and I could actually finish the game in the time I had left. I wasn't quite sure what the exact gameplay would be like, but I thought once I got the visual style down, I would figure it out. The first thing I did was head over to Low Spec to grab a palette. I usually pick a pre-made low color count palette since I don't really understand color theory. The second thing I did was put a little mood board together using Milanote. For inspiration, I really liked the square, low resolution train scene from Victor Arts that I saw recently. The square boundary reminded me of a Polaroid, so I thought of having it like you're looking at a moving picture. And the low resolution would help out a lot with making things easier to draw. So I opted for a canvas with dimensions of 96 by 96, a sort of arbitrary size. I jumped into Sprite and started drawing out some mountains and a sky. However, there was something terribly wrong with this. The colors weren't quite looking right. I tried a few other palettes, but what I was really envisioning in my mind was something like the opening to Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. The colors were just so cozy and relaxing. But then I realized there's nothing stopping me from just directly copying the color palette to use myself. So that's what I did with the second pass. I added some grass, a gradient to the sky, and some power lines, and in my opinion this looked much better. Next step was to make the cycling character, which I made a simple 4-frame cycling animation for, along with an idle animation. Here's the animation in the mockup. I also made two other backgrounds, one in front of the ocean, and another one in front of Mount Fuji. Seeing it animated in front of these backgrounds made me feel like it was starting to come together, so I was pretty happy about that, but there was still something missing. The background is just too static. I really like the vibe of the parallaxing background in this train scene from Robin that I saw on Twitter a while ago, so I knew I wanted to have some parallax. I first stitched together the backgrounds into a giant image, and since I thought this jam was a good opportunity to get acquainted with Godot 4.0, I downloaded and booted it up to get started on development. I've been making Playdate games for the last year or so where the development is done in more of a framework than an engine, so I was fully prepared to write the parallax code myself, but I found out that there's a built-in parallax node, which was a nice surprise. I wrote a simple acceleration and deceleration script to control the character and the camera, and you can see that the clouds and the phone lines are moving slower than the foreground grass. The background and animations weren't implemented yet, but that was pretty quick to add. Here's Mount Fuji coming into view. Once I saw that for the first time, I felt like I generally got the vibes I was going for, but not so much with the gameplay since there was basically none. I went back to the drawing board and added a bunch of elements to the mockup. I decided that maybe you could be biking along the countryside, delivering potions to different people. You can pick up flowers that would go into this inventory, and you can brew them together to make a potion. Then houses would periodically show up and you can deliver potions to them. Why potions? I don't know, I just think they're cool. Back in Godot, I made it so that the flowers would show up randomly and you can click on them to pick them up. Houses would also show up and you can click on them, but doing so wouldn't do anything quite yet. It seemed like I was heading in a good direction, but then I looked at the clock and I realized I only had about 5 hours left in the jam. If I was going to go through with the initial plan, I needed to code an entire inventory system, a potion brewing system, record and add sound effects, add polish, figure out exporting, playtest for bugs, and set up the jam page. I also wanted to make music, but I definitely didn't have time for that. I realized I wasn't going to make it at this rate, so I was seriously considering switching to the jam format to give myself more time, but I decided last minute to pivot and massively cut the scope. Screw the potions, people would just get the flowers directly. Making that small decision made a huge difference, so I switched out the UI to a simpler one with just the flowers as part of the inventory. Next step was to actually allow the player to give the flowers. I figured I would just make this super simple to make it easier on myself. I used Godot's particle system to create this question mark particle effect to indicate someone responding to the door, and using the same particle with a heart texture instead to indicate someone receiving the flowers. In game, I played around with the timing a bit and hooked up the inventory to use one of the flowers at random, as if someone was selecting a flower that they liked, which was really more of a cheap way to get around having to code a flower selection UI. Last step was to record some sound effects. I recorded my bike wheel for the cycling, smacked this bush for the flower picking, opened and knocked my door for the door, swung my phone around in circles for the win, and lastly I used this online piano keyboard to make a short jingle. Altogether, it looks something like this. Overall, not the most interesting thing gameplay-wise that I made, but mood-wise, I think I like it the most. Given that I was relearning Godot and jet lag, I'm still pretty happy with the result. I can imagine extending this out by adding a bit more background, some music, vending machines, and a bit more gameplay. However, I'm still not decided on whether I want to keep working on this or not. Anyways, you can play Inaka Flowers with the itch.io link in the description, and see you next time.